The Florida Panhandle coast, where I'd dropped anchor for the past few months, had a kind of forgotten edge-of-the-world quiet that almost let a man breathe. Almost. I was trying. Lord knows, after Panama and Alistair Thorne's corporate treachery, after too many betrayals that left a taste like battery acid, I needed quiet. The Sea Witch bobbed gently in a secluded cove off Apalachicola Bay. The only sounds the cry of gulls, the whisper of wind through the sawgrass, and the occasional thump of a mullet jumping. I was scraping barnacles, patching lines, drinking cheap beer, trying to convince myself Ouroboros and its many-headed hydra of global fuckery was someone else's problem now. Sully, naturally, was the one to shatter the illusion. His encrypted ping on the ancient, supposedly untraceable SATCOM unit I kept for dire emergencies only came through late one afternoon, just as the sky was starting to bleed orange over the Gulf. Jack, his voice, filtered through layers of digital noise, still sounded like gravel rolling downhill. "You decent?" "Depends on your definition, Sully," I grunted, wiping grease off my hands. "And I thought we agreed this line was for world-ending, no other options scenarios." "Might qualify," he said, a rare note of something almost like urgency in his tone. "Got a client, big one, Silicon Valley money, name of Elias Sterling, Sterling Terragen Renewables. He's looking for someone off the books. Someone with your particular, shall we say, problem-solving expertise." "Not interested," I said flatly. "Tell Mr. Sterling to call a security consultant. Or the damn Pinkertons. I'm retired. Officially this time." A dry chuckle. "Tried that. He says, and I quote, 'Pinkertons are for finding stolen office equipment, not for dealing with high-level industrial sabotage orchestrated by enemies of progress.' Says his people vetted my discreet referral service. And your name, or rather, one of your old, very dusty handles, came up with 5 stars for complex threat neutralization." "Flattering," I said, unimpressed. "Still not interested. Last time I took a job from a rich guy with a problem, it involved bioweapons in the Everglades, then weaponized art in Key West, then corporate snakes in Panama. My tolerance for complex threats is currently at an all-time low." "This one pays, Jack," Sully pressed. "Like, pays. 7 figures up front, another 7 on successful completion, plus unlimited operational budget. Sterling's got more money than God and twice the paranoia right now." That got my attention, marginally. Money was always a problem. The Sea Witch wasn't getting any younger, and my own operational fund was looking anorexic. "What kind of problem inspires that kind of generosity?" "Sabotage," Sully said. "His flagship renewable energy sites in the Mojave Desert. Massive solar arrays, cutting-edge wind farms. Someone's hitting them. Not just vandalism. This is professional, targeted. Taking out critical control systems, specific transmission nodes, even using what looks like directed energy pulses to fry sensitive electronics, leaving behind eco-terrorist slogans and a trail of misdirection that has the FBI and local sheriffs chasing their tails." "Eco-terrorists with directed energy weapons?" I snorted. "Sounds more like state-sponsored or very well-funded corporate espionage." "That's what Sterling thinks," Sully confirmed. "He believes someone's trying to cripple his company, maybe derail the entire U.S. renewable energy push. Says the official investigation is going nowhere, possibly due to internal leaks or high-level interference. He needs someone to go in quiet, identify the real perpetrators, their motives, their backers, and stop them." "Before," Sully paused, "his entire multi-billion-dollar green dream goes up in smoke, literally. Mojave Desert, solar farms, eco-terrorist cover. It sounded different, at least, not the usual humid swamps or corrupt port cities, but the smell. The smell of sophisticated opposition, misdirection, and high-level manipulation. That felt depressingly familiar. Ouroboros had a habit of operating under false flags, co-opting or creating extremist groups to serve their own agenda. Could this be them? Playing a new angle? Energy disruption? Why me? I asked again. There are plenty of deniable private security outfits who'd kill for that kind of payday. He wants someone with proven experience against unconventional, highly sophisticated adversaries operating outside state sanction, Sully said carefully. Someone who understands asymmetrical threats and complex conspiracies. Someone who can operate with absolute discretion and isn't afraid to get their hands dirty if necessary. Your redacted Ouroboros-related after-action reports, the ones that conveniently omit your current fugitive status but highlight certain successes, apparently made an impression on his security advisors. So, my past victories against the syndicate were now being used as a resume to drag me back into the fire. The irony was a bitter pill. Tell Sterling I'll meet his representative, I said finally, against my better judgment. Neutral ground, public place. No direct contact with him until I assess the situation. And Sully, I added, if this smells even remotely like another client trying to play me, I walk, instantly. Understood, Jack. He has a senior VP of special projects, woman named Albright, ex-DIA apparently. She'll be the initial contact. I'll send you the meet parameters. And Jack? Yeah? Watch yourself. Sterling's a tech mogul. They live in a world of algorithms and zero-sum games. Trust is just another variable to be exploited. The meet was at a high-end seafood place in Tampa, the kind with valet parking and wine lists thicker than my arm. Ms. Albright was already there, seated at a discreet corner table overlooking the bay. Late 40s, tailored business suit, sharp gray eyes that missed nothing, an air of cool, competent professionalism that probably cost Sterling a fortune in salary. She looked like she ate nails for breakfast and filed reports in triplicate before her first coffee. "Mr. Kincaid?" she asked as I approached, her voice crisp, no handshake offered. She used my real name. So much for Sully's dusty handles. Sterling's people had done their homework. "You can call me Cole," I said, taking the seat opposite her, using the alias that seemed to have developed a life of its own. "Heard you have a pest problem in the desert." Albright didn't smile. "Mr. Sterling prefers to call it unwarranted hostile action against critical national infrastructure assets," she corrected smoothly. She slid a slim data slate across the table. "This contains a preliminary overview of the incidents at our Mojave facilities, Soul Guard Alpha and Wind Weaver Mesa. Sabotage methodologies, timelines, current law enforcement assessments which are inadequate." I picked up the slate. "And what does Mr. Sterling really think is happening, Ms. Albright?" Her gray eyes met mine directly. "He thinks someone is trying to start a war, Mr. Cole, or prevent one, by systematically crippling America's independent energy future. He believes these eco-terrorists are a front, a convenient misdirection for a far more sophisticated and dangerous adversary, possibly state-sponsored, possibly something else. Something else. Ouroboros. She didn't say the name, but the implication hung in the air between us, thick as the Florida humidity. "He wants you to go to the Mojave," Albright continued, her voice a precise, emotionless monotone. "Establish a cover. We can facilitate credentials as a specialized geological surveyor or environmental impact consultant attached to one of our subsidiary research firms. Infiltrate, observe, identify the true perpetrators and their objectives, and then neutralize the threat, discreetly, permanently, if necessary." The pay was indeed astronomical, as Sully promised. The operational budget, effectively unlimited. The autonomy, absolute. The risks? Off the charts. Mojave Desert, sophisticated saboteurs, potential Ouroboros involvement, and a tech mogul client who likely saw me as just another disposable tool, an algorithm to solve a problem. "This isn't just about protecting solar panels, is it?" I asked, looking at the data slate, then back at her. "What aren't you telling me?" A flicker of something in her eyes. Respect? Annoyance? Mr. Sterling believes the attackers may also be targeting something more specific than just the power grid. Proprietary research. Next-generation energy storage technology being field-tested at SolGuard Alpha. Technology that could revolutionize the industry. Or, in the wrong hands, be weaponized. Weaponized energy tech. Now it sounded even more like an Ouroboros shopping list. I thought of the EMP device from Argus I, the bioagents in the Everglades. They were always looking for the next big stick. If I take this, I said slowly, I operate alone. My methods, my discretion. Sterling stays out of my way, provides whatever logistical support I request through you, no questions asked. And the second payment tranche hits my account the moment I confirm the threat is neutralized. Agreed? Ms. Albright gave a curt nod. Agreed, Mr. Cole. Mr. Sterling is results-oriented. She slid a secure satellite phone across the table. This is for direct emergency contact with me only. Initial funding will be confirmed within the hour. Your flight to Las Vegas can be arranged at your convenience. I picked up the phone. Felt heavier than it looked. The Mojave. Sounded hot, dry, and a long way from the water. But the scent of Ouroboros, the hint of their familiar deadly game being played out under a different sun, it was a lure I couldn't seem to resist, no matter how many times I swore I was done. The unexpected mission had found me. Again. Trading Florida, humid embrace for the Mojave, dry heat, felt like stepping onto another planet. I flew into Vegas under the new alias Ms. Albright's people had cooked up. Ethan Stone, geotechnical consultant specializing in arid environment infrastructure stability. Sounded impressive enough to bore most people into leaving me alone. Picked up an anonymous dust-colored Ford pickup that looked like it belonged to every third rancher in Nevada, along with a satellite phone, identical to the one Albright had given me, this one preloaded with Sterling Terrigen's secure comms protocols. Then I drove west, into the sun, leaving the neon mirage of Vegas shrinking in the rearview mirror. The Mojave unfolded, vast, silent, beautiful, in a way that promised slow death if you made a wrong turn. Mountains like crumpled brown paper bags shimmered in the distance. Joshua trees clawed at the pale sky. The heat was a physical presence, pressing down, sucking the moisture out of everything, including my resolve to ever take another job that didn't involve a boat and a cold beer. Sterling Terrigen's flagship facility, SolGuard Alpha, was a sprawling sea of photovoltaic panels covering several square miles of flat desert valley bordered by jagged sun-baked mountains. Looked like an alien installation from a distance. The main operations center was a low-slung, hyper-modern building shimmering behind heat haze and high-security fences. I checked in as Ethan Stone, presented my credentials, digitally impeccable thanks to Albright's efficiency, to a harried-looking site manager named Henderson. Henderson looked like he hadn't slept in a week, which, given the sabotage Albright described, was probably accurate. He was mid-50s, leathery tan, eyes bloodshot from stress, and probably too much coffee. Another consultant, he grumbled, shaking my hand weakly. Sterling's sending you guys out here like we got a damn infestation of PhDs. Last one wanted to take soil samples from under panel array 7 during a dust devil. Nearly got himself sandblasted into next week. I prefer my soil samples stationary, I said dryly, and my skin intact. My specialty is assessing geological stability. Stress points in the infrastructure, especially around the perimeter where some of your incidents have occurred. Incidents, Henderson snorted. Yeah, that's a polite word for it. Damn eco-freaks trying to send us back to the Stone Age. He waved a hand vaguely towards the endless expanse of solar panels. Got a map of the recent damage sites, security patrol logs, what good they did. Help yourself. Just try not to break anything else, Stone. My ulcer can't take it. I spent the next 3 days driving the dusty perimeter roads of SolGuard Alpha in my pickup, occasionally using a battered Sterling Terrigen ATV for the rougher sections. Played the part of the meticulous geological consultant. Took soil samples, mostly just dirt, made notes on non-existent fault lines, peered at rock formations through binoculars. Mostly, I looked for patterns in the sabotage the eco-terrorists had supposedly committed. The damage was professional, precise, not random vandalism. Specific junction boxes fried, fiber optic control lines expertly severed, small shaped charges used to disable critical support structures on transmission towers, always placed for maximum effect, minimal collateral blast damage beyond the target. And the calling cards, spray-painted slogans about Mother Earth's revenge or no more sun stealers, felt theatrical, too neat, like someone wanted the authorities to jump to an obvious and wrong conclusion. Ouroboros loved their false flags. On the fourth day, out near the southwestern perimeter, where a major transmission pylon had been crippled a week earlier, I found something that didn't fit the eco-warrior narrative. Faint, almost invisible in the hard-packed desert sand, but there if you knew what to look for. Tracks. Not the wide, aggressive tread of off-road recreational vehicles the local weekend warriors favored. These were narrower, deeper, spaced for a heavier, specialized vehicle. Maybe a modified dune buggy or light tactical ATV, something built for speed and rough terrain, not for joyriding. And they weren't heading towards the damaged pylon from the main access roads. They were leading away from it, northwest, deeper into the uninhabited mountain range bordering Sterling's property, towards nowhere. I followed the faint trail on foot for a mile, losing it occasionally in rocky washes, then picking it up again. It led towards a series of steep, narrow canyons cutting into the mountains. No eco-activist group I knew of operated with that kind of logistical discipline or specialized transport. Back at the Soul Guard Ops Center that evening, I pulled up the detailed geological survey maps Henderson had provided, spread them out on the dusty table in my temporary site office, a converted shipping container with a rattling air conditioner. The area northwest of the damaged pylon, where the tracks headed, was marked as historically significant mining district, disused. Further zooming showed a cluster of old claim markers, abandoned mine shafts, and the faded name of a forgotten silver boomtown, Ophir Gulch, not on any modern road maps, remote, isolated, perfect for a hidden base. "Henderson," I said, finding him hunched over a flickering monitor in the main control room. "Those mountains northwest of Pylon 7 Charlie, what's out there?" He glanced up, surprised. "Northwest? Nothing but rattlesnakes and abandoned glory holes. Old Ophir Gulch mining district. Played out 100 years ago. Why?" "My geological surveys suggest some unusual stratum formations in that area," I lied smoothly. "Might indicate subsurface instability that could affect future pylon placements if Sterling plans to expand the array that way. Thought I'd take a drive out tomorrow, do some core sampling." Ethan Stone, diligent consultant. Henderson shrugged, already turning back to his screen. "Knock yourself out. Just don't get bit by a sidewinder or fall down a mine shaft. Last thing I need is another damn emergency rescue diverting resources from keeping these panels online." The next morning, I loaded the Ford pickup with extra water, fuel, some basic climbing gear I'd acquired in Vegas, and my discreetly packed surveying tools, the ones that didn't a T involve taking soil samples. Told Henderson I'd be out of comms range for most of the day exploring the Ophir Gulch district. He just grunted, already focused on a new power fluctuation alert blinking on his console. The drive out towards the mountains was slow, the access road quickly devolving into a barely discernible track. The sun climbed, baking the landscape into a shimmering mirage. The silence was immense, broken only by the rumble of the pickup's engine and the crunch of tires on gravel. This was Ouroboros country, maybe. Desolate, unforgiving, far from prying eyes. Perfect for hiding an operation, for planning attacks, for making people disappear. Ophir Gulch itself, when I finally reached the mouth of the canyon leading towards it, was marked only by a couple of sun-bleached, bullet-riddled wooden signs warning of unstable mine shafts. The track ahead looked rough, barely passable even for the Ford. I pulled over, cut the engine. The silence descended again, vast and watchful. Somewhere up that canyon, amidst the ghosts of long-dead miners and forgotten silver dreams, I had a feeling I'd find the source of Sterling's eco-terrorist problem. And maybe, just maybe, another tentacle of the Ouroboros serpent. The desert call had been answered. Now it was time to see what answered back. I grabbed my pack, checked the load in my pistol, and started walking up into the shimmering, silent heat of Ophir Gulch. Ophir Gulch wasn't so much a ghost town as a collection of sun-bleached skeletons, picked clean by 100 years of desert winds and scavenging prospectors. Tumble-down shacks of weathered gray wood, a collapsed headframe over a mine shaft that breathed cold, stale air, the rusting hulk of a Model T Ford slowly dissolving back into the ochre dust. Silence pressed in, heavy and absolute, broken only by the crunch of my boots on the gravelly soil and the occasional dry skitter of a lizard darting across a hot rock. But the faint vehicle tracks I'd followed from Solgard Alpha led straight up into this canyon, towards the heart of these ruins. Someone was disturbing the ghosts. I moved slow, using the crumbling adobe walls and heaps of mine tailings for cover, scanning every shadow, every empty window frame. The tracks, I noticed, didn't just meander through the main street of Ophir Gulch. They converged purposefully towards a cluster of larger, more intact stone buildings at the canyon's narrowest point, built against the sheer rock face. An old assay office, maybe, or the mine supervisor's headquarters. From a distance, it looked as derelict as the rest. Closer, I started seeing the anomalies. A new-looking solar panel array, small but functional, angled towards the sun on the roof of the sturdiest stone building. A thick, insulated power cable snaking from the panels down towards a reinforced steel door that clearly wasn't 100 years old. Discrete motion sensor cameras, painted to blend with the weathered stone, tucked under the eaves, and a neatly lettered sign by the steel door, Mojave Desert Ecosystem Initiative, Long-Term Creosote Bush and Desert Tortoise Viability Study. Restricted area, authorized personnel only. Right. Desert tortoises needing that much power and a vault door. The environmental research cover was almost insultingly lazy, but out here, miles from anywhere, who was going to question it? Unless someone like Ethan Stone, geotechnical consultant, showed up looking for subsurface instability. I found a vantage point high on the canyon wall opposite the stone building, a shallow rock overhang offering shade from the brutal sun and a clear view of the compound entrance. Settled in with my binoculars, started watching. Waited. The desert taught patience if it taught you anything. Took about an hour. The steel door opened. 2 men stepped out. Khaki work pants, sturdy boots, plain t-shirts. But they weren't scientists. Their movements were too economical, too alert. One carried a compact assault rifle slung casually over his shoulder. The other had a powerful handgun holstered openly on his hip. They did a quick visual sweep of the canyon entrance. Then one lit a cigarette, leaning against the stone wall, while the other disappeared around the back of the building. Syndicate muscle, or a very well-armed Tortoise Protection League. My money was on the former. More activity followed. Another man emerged, carrying what looked like a sophisticated atmospheric sensor on a tripod, set it up near the building entrance. Plausible eco-research gear. But then a battered pickup truck, similar to mine but with a camper shell, rumbled up the canyon track from the direction I'd come, parked near the building. The driver, another hard-looking type, unloaded several heavy, locked Pelican cases, the kind used for sensitive electronics or equipment, and carried them inside. Not your typical botany supplies. This was it, the hidden base, disguised, however thinly, as environmental research. These were Sterling's saboteurs, Ouroboros's desert rats, hiding out in a ghost town, launching surgical strikes against renewable energy sites. Why? Industrial sabotage for a competitor, or something more in line with Ouroboros's grander, more destructive ambitions? Destabilizing power grids, creating chaos, proving green energy unreliable? I needed a closer look, Needed to know what was in those pelican cases, what kind of tech they were using. Waiting until the late afternoon sun started to dip, casting long shadows across the canyon floor. When the heat might make the guards a little drowsier, a little less alert, I began my approach. Circled wide, using the cover of the canyon walls and the densest patches of creosote and cholla cactus, moving towards the rear of the stone building complex. The back was quieter, less exposed. Found a single, barred window caked with decades of dust. The bars were old, rusted. Took me 10 minutes of careful, patient work with a small pry bar from my pack to loosen one enough to pull it free without making too much noise. The window itself was stuck fast. Used the pry bar again, carefully, easing it open an inch, then two. Peered inside. Dimly lit storeroom. Shelves filled with more pelican cases, some open, revealing complex electronic components, circuit boards, specialized tools. And on a workbench, printouts, schematics. Looked like targeting data for Solguard Alpha's primary transformer substation. This was more than just vandalism. This was sophisticated, planned industrial warfare. I was just about to try and widen the window opening, get inside for a closer look, when I heard it. The faint crunch of boots on gravel, coming from around the side of the building, towards me. Froze. Two of them. The same type of hard cases I'd seen out front, moving with quiet professionalism, rifles held ready, scouts, making a perimeter sweep. They hadn't seen me yet, but they were heading straight for my position. No time to retreat back the way I came. The open ground was too exposed. My only option was deeper into the ruins behind me, using the crumbling adobe walls and mine tailings as cover. I eased back from the window, heart hammering, trying to melt into the shadows. One of the scouts paused, maybe 10 yards away, his head tilted, listening. Did I make a sound? Did the wind shift? He unslung his rifle, murmured something to his partner. They both started moving towards my little alcove, slowly, methodically, weapons up. My cover was blown, or about to be. Running now meant a chase through open, unfamiliar terrain against two armed professionals who knew this area. Bad odds. Fighting them here now before they raised a full alarm. Still bad odds, but maybe slightly better. I drew my pistol, the SIG I'd carried since Panama, its weight familiar, reassuring. Crouched lower behind a crumbling section of adobe wall, waiting. The first scout reached the edge of the storeroom window I'd just been at, peered towards it, then started to move past my position. His partner was maybe 5 feet behind him. Now. I moved fast, coming up from behind the wall, slamming the butt of the SIG hard against the side of the first scout S-head as he passed. He grunted, dropping like a sack of rocks, his rifle clattering on the stones. The second scout spun, surprised, bringing his own rifle up. I didn't give him the chance. Fired once, point blank, center mass. The suppressed shot was a dull cough in the desert silence. He collapsed backwards, eyes wide with shock, then vacant. 2 down, silently. But for how long? They'd be missed. Their comms would go unanswered. The hornet's nest was officially kicked. I grabbed the first scout's rifle, a compact, modern bullpup design, much better than my pistol, checked his gear for spare mags, a radio I could maybe use or disable. Then I turned and ran, not back towards my truck, but deeper into the labyrinth of Ophir Gulch's abandoned mine shafts and collapsing tunnels, the shouts of alerted guards already beginning to echo from the main compound behind me, the desert suddenly feeling very small and very hostile. The echoes of the brief, brutal takedown of the 2 scouts faded into the oppressive silence of Ophir Gulch, leaving only the rasp of my own breathing and the distant, angry shouts from the direction of the main compound. They knew they had an intruder, knew their perimeter was breached. The entire hornet's nest would be buzzing now, armed hornets spilling out, looking for whoever just swatted 2 of their own. My truck was miles away, down canyon. Getting back to it through open terrain with a full alert underway was suicide. The only option was deeper, into the labyrinth of abandoned mine workings that honeycombed these mountains, hoped to lose them in the darkness, find another way out. I grabbed the dead scout's bullpup rifle, compact, modern, definitely not standard environmental research issue, checked its load, slung it, and plunged into the nearest mine, added a gaping black maw in the canyon wall that smelled of damp earthbat guano and something else, something almost like old despair. The flashlight beam cut a narrow swath through the oppressive darkness, illuminating rotting timbers, loose rockfall, narrow tracks disappearing into nothingness. Air grew colder, staler, with every step. Behind me, I could hear the sounds of the pursuit faintly. Shouts, dogs barking now. They were coming. The next hour was a blur of desperate, stumbling progress through the interconnected tunnels. Twisting passages, sudden drops, flooded sections where I waded through icy, waist-deep water, always listening for sounds of pursuit, occasionally glancing back, seeing the distant flicker of their lights. My leg, the one shot up on the Serafina, screamed in protest. My newer wounds from the scout fight throbbed. I was running on fumes, pure adrenaline. Then, a partial collapse. A section of tunnel roof had given way, blocking the main passage I was following. Scrambled over the loose rock, squeezed through a narrow gap, and found myself in a different system of tunnels. Older, narrower, less stable. I was lost, disoriented. The sounds of pursuit thankfully fainter now. Maybe I'd shaken them. Or maybe they just hadn't found this particular rat hole yet. I pushed on, needing to find a way out, any way out. Took a side passage that seemed to angle slightly upwards. It opened, unexpectedly, into a small natural cavern, surprisingly dry and occupied. A figure rose silently from a pile of what looked like old blankets and animal hides in the far corner. A figure that seemed to materialize from the shadows themselves. Old, ancient almost, lean as a whipcord. Skin like cured leather stretched taut over sharp bones, eyes that burned with a fierce, wary light in a deeply lined face. He wore patched denim, a battered felt hat, and held a long, ancient-looking lever-action rifle with an ease that spoke of long familiarity. He didn't say anything, just watched me, the rifle held steady, aimed not quite at my chest, but close enough. My own rifle was still slung. I raised my hands slowly, palms open. "Easy, friend," I said, my voice hoarse. "Not looking for trouble." The old man didn't move, didn't speak, just kept those burning eyes fixed on me. Looked like he'd stepped out of a damn tin-type photograph from the 1880s. A desert hermit, a prospector who never left, a silent witness to the slow decay of Ophir Gulch. Got lost in the tunnels. I tried again, keeping my voice low, calm. Trying to find a way out. Those men, from the compound down canyon, they're looking for me. Still silence. Just those eyes, studying me. I could hear the faint drip of water somewhere in the cavern, my own ragged breathing. "They ain't good men," I said finally, taking a gamble. "The ones in the compound. They're not who they say they are." A flicker of something in those old eyes. Interest? Agreement? "No," the hermit finally rasped, his voice like stones grinding together. "They ain't. Been watching 'em." He lowered the rifle a fraction. "Disturb the quiet. Bring bad medicine." "You live here?" I asked, gesturing around the small cavern. Saw a makeshift stove, a bedroll, neatly stacked supplies. "Name's Caleb," he said, ignoring my question. You ain't with them. Smell different. Don't smell like machines and lies." He spat onto the dusty cavern floor. "Who are you?" "Ethan Stone." I used my cover alias, though it felt thin here. "Geologist. Got on the wrong side of those fellas down canyon," Caleb grunted. "Wrong side of them is usually 6 feet under. They got dogs out. Heard 'em. And trucks. They ain't playing." He paused, then asked, "Why they hunting you, geologist?" Saw something I wasn't supposed to see, I said, keeping it vague. Asked too many questions. They don't like questions, Caleb agreed. Just like they done it like folks looking too close at what they haul in at night, or what they listen for. Listen for? Caleb nodded towards the deeper parts of the mountain, his eyes distant. Place hums sometimes, low, like the earth itself is talking. They got ears pressed to the stone, those ones, and they watch the sky, not for birds, for other things. Not watching lizards, he'd said metaphorically. Watching the sky. Listening to the earth. It didn't sound like eco-research. Sounded like signals intelligence, maybe seismic monitoring for underground tests, or tracking something orbital. Something that fit with Ouroboros's high-tech profile. What kind of things do they haul in? I pressed. Metal boxes, Caleb said, his eyes narrowing again. Heavy. Handled careful. Not tools for counting tortoises, I reckon. And the men, they ain't tree huggers. Eyes like Mojave rattlers, most of 'em. Take orders from one fella. Tall, quiet, moves like smoke, looks right through you. The leader, the syndicate operative. They talk about what they're doing? Caleb snorted. Talk in whispers, foreign tongues sometimes, but I seen their maps. Not maps of tortoise trails, maps with lines, grids, pointing towards the big solar farm Sterling built over in the next valley, and towards the dam upriver, targeting the solar farm. The dam, critical infrastructure, not just sabotage for profit then. Something bigger, strategic. They planning on hurting those places? Don't know about hurting, Caleb said slowly, but they ain't planting flowers. They're building something. Something that needs those metal boxes. Something that needs the quiet of these old hills. He looked at me then, a long, hard stare. You aim to stop 'em, geologist? Thinking about it, I admitted. He was silent for another long moment. Then he jerked his head towards a narrow fissure at the back of the cavern I hadn't noticed before. That passage there leads out to the high ridge, west side of the canyon. Bypasses their main patrols, if you move quiet and don't break your damn neck. They won't expect anyone coming that way. He picked up an old canteen from his supplies, offered it to me. Water, then get. Trouble you brought with you is gonna find this place sooner or later, and I got enough ghosts in these hills already without adding yours. I took the canteen, drank deeply. The water was cool, clean. Appreciate it, Caleb. Don't appreciate nothing, he grunted. Just want the quiet back. He turned away, already dismissing me, settling back into his pile of hides. I checked the load in the captured rifle, slung it. The cryptic clues from the old hermit painted a disturbing picture. Not eco-terrorists, professionals, building something, targeting infrastructure, using the desert as their shield. And the leader. The man who moved like smoke, with eyes like a rattler. He sounded like my next conversation. I slipped into the narrow fissure Caleb indicated, leaving the old hermit to his solitude and his ghosts. The passage was tight, dark, heading upwards, towards the high ridge, towards whatever came next. Caleb's silent witness had given me a direction, a few more pieces of the puzzle, and a renewed sense of the danger I was walking into. The mirage was starting to shimmer, revealing the hard, ugly realities beneath. Caleb's escape route wasn't a tunnel. It was a gut-wrenching scramble up a narrow chimney of rock, then along a precarious goat trail that traversed the high canyon wall, finally depositing me onto a wind-swept mesa overlooking Ophir Gulch from the west, miles from where I'd left my truck. By the time I made it back to the ford, dehydrated, bleeding from a fresh collection of scrapes, every muscle screaming, the sun was a merciless copper coin burning high in the vast desert sky. The pursuit from the compound hadn't reached this far, or they'd given up on the mine tunnels. For now, back in the relative anonymity of a cheap motel room in Beatty, the nearest spit-in-the-road town that still had functioning electricity, I processed Caleb's cryptic words. Not watching lizards. Watching the sky. listening to the earth. Maps with lines pointing towards Sterling's solar farm and the dam upriver. Leader with eyes like a rattler. This wasn't eco-terrorism. This was something else. Something cold, calculated, and, given the syndicate muscle I'd already encountered, undoubtedly linked to Ouroboros. Elias Sterling, the tech mogul client, might have been closer to the truth than he knew when he suspected sophisticated state or corporate actors. I needed to see this leader, understand their specific game. Ophir Gulch was too hot to approach directly again. But Caleb mentioned they watched the sky and listened to the earth. That meant observation posts, sensor arrays, possibly repeater stations for communications, likely positioned on high ground around the valley, away from the main compound. Those would be less heavily guarded, maybe offering a window into their operations, a chance to observe this rattler-eyed leader in his element. Sully, via our usual painful secure comms dance, managed to get me satellite imagery of the region around Ophir Gulch. Cross-referencing it with topographical maps and Caleb's vague descriptions, I pinpointed 3 potential sites: remote peaks, old fire lookouts, places with clear lines of sight to both Solguard Alpha and the Hoover Dam further east. The next 2 days were a blur of heat, dust, and patient, painstaking surveillance. Hiked miles into the brutal backcountry, setting up observation posts with my high-powered binoculars and a directional microphone disguised as, ironically, environmental monitoring equipment, part of the Ethan Stone geologist kit Albright had provided. The first 2 sites were dry holes, abandoned relay stations, nothing more. But the third, a jagged tor overlooking a desolate stretch of desert that offered a panoramic view of the approaches to Ophir Gulch and a distant glimpse of the Solguard Alpha array, paid off. Tucked into a natural rock shelter near the summit was a small, camouflaged encampment. 2 men, dressed in the same practical khaki as the Ophir Gulch guards, manned it. They had sophisticated radio gear, a powerful spotting scope, and what looked like a portable satellite uplink. Not just watching, they were communicating, coordinating. I settled in 1,000 yards away, hidden in a crevice, content to watch them watch. Late on the second day of my vigil, a battered Jeep Cherokee, kicking up a plume of dust, rumbled up the barely discernible track leading towards their lookout. It wasn't a supply run. The man who stepped out was the one Caleb described. Tall, lean, moving with a predatory grace that seemed out of place in the dusty, functional gear he wore. He didn't have the overt menace of Rico Alvarez or the cold intellect of Marcus Thorne, but there was a focused intensity in his eyes, visible even from this distance, a restless energy. This was the leader. This was Lysander. He spent an hour with the 2 men at the lookout, reviewing charts, talking animatedly, occasionally pointing towards the distant Solguard Alpha facility, then towards the mountains where the dam lay hidden. My directional mic, boosted to its limits, picked up fragments of their conversation, filtered by wind and distance, but enough. "See Phase 1 successful," Lysander was saying, his voice calm, authoritative, carrying a faint, unplaceable European accent. Sterling's rattled, authorities chasing their tails, blaming the usual green zealots. Media loves it, perfect cover. "The seismic sensors we planted near the dam?" one of the men asked. "Preliminary readings encouraging," Lysander replied. "The old fault lines are more active than their official surveys suggest. A precise targeted disruption during peak load at Solguard, combined with a sympathetic vibration near the dam's primary spillway control during the spring runoff projections. It should create a cascade failure across the entire regional grid. Blame it on unforeseen geological stress exacerbated by the solar farm's footprint. Beautifully ironic, no?" My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about disrupting Sterling's company for profit. This was about triggering a massive power outage, maybe even structural damage to the dam, using the eco-sabotage as a smokescreen for a far more devastating attack, crippling the regional grid. For what? Chaos? To prove a point? To create an opening for Ouroboros to exploit? The investors are pleased with the initial market volatility projections, Lysander continued, confirming my suspicion. This quarter's returns from our Environmental Mitigation Fund will be substantial. Once the grid collapses, Sterling Terragen will be bankrupt, their stock worthless. Our partners, he almost purred the word, will acquire the remaining green energy assets for pennies on the dollar, then sell the stabilized grid access back to the state at a premium. Pure profit, wrapped in ecological necessity. So that was it. Not genuine environmentalism. Not even just straightforward sabotage. Allow Ouroboros-linked entities to snap them up cheap and then profit from the manufactured crisis. Cynical, brutal, profitable. Ouroboros to the core. Lysander wasn't just a field operative, he was a corporate raider disguised as a desert ascetic. He unrolled another map, pointing. The final charges for Solgard need to be placed here, here, and here, targeting the primary inverter substations. Synchronized detonation with the seismic resonators near the dam. Timing is critical. 24 hours from now, no mistakes. 24 hours. That was the deadline. I kept watching, recording, as Lysander finished his briefing, then got back in his jeep and drove away, leaving his 2 men at the lookout. I had the what, the where, the when, and the who. Lysander, the charismatic Mirage leader, an Ouroboros operative bent on weaponizing environmental concerns for massive profit and strategic disruption. I needed to get closer, needed physical proof, the maps, the charge placement details, something to take to Albright that would force Sterling to act beyond just hiring me. As dusk settled, casting long purple shadows across the desert, I began my careful approach towards the now 2-man lookout post. They were professionals, but they were also relaxed now, their leader gone, probably thinking about chow. I moved like smoke, using the rocks, the failing light, got within 50 feet, heard one of them grumbling about the chow rotation. Perfect. I was just about to make my move, try to take them both down quickly, silently, grab whatever intel was in their tent, when one of them stood up, stretched, and walked directly towards the edge of the escarpment, binoculars raised, sweeping the area almost directly above my hiding spot. He paused, lowered the binoculars slowly. Then, very deliberately, he raised his hand and pointed straight at me, his voice cutting through the desert stillness. Got movement, Sector 4, possible hostile. So much for the element of surprise. My cover at the lookout, however distant, was blown. The other operative instantly grabbed his rifle, shouting into his radio. Action, it seemed, was unavoidable, and I was, once again, dramatically outnumbered. The operative's shout, "Possible hostile, Sector 4!" ripped through the high desert stillness like a razor. No time for finesse, no time for clever evasions, just pure, adrenalized reaction. I kicked back from my concealed observation point, sending loose scree skittering down the rock face, and plunged sideways into a narrow game trail that snaked down from the tor towards the labyrinth of canyons below. Behind me, shouts, the crack of a rifle shot echoing off the barren rock, thankfully wild. They knew I was here. They knew I'd heard. Lysander's timeline was 24 hours. That meant every second I wasted getting caught or killed was another second closer to his cascade failure across the regional power grid, another tick towards whatever chaos Ouroboros planned to reap from the ashes. The game trail deteriorated fast into a treacherous scramble down loose rock and thorny scrub, dropping into a narrow, winding canyon carved deep into the ochre and rust-colored mountains. The air grew hotter, trapped between the sheer rock walls. My only advantage was surprise and a desperate head start. They knew this terrain, had probably mapped every inch. I was running blind, relying on instinct and years of navigating ugly places with uglier people on my heels. Sounds of pursuit echoed from the rim above, shouts, the dislodging of rocks. They were fanning out, trying to cut off escape routes, likely had vehicles moving to block the canyon mouths. Standard procedure. Efficient. deadly. I pushed deeper into the canyon, the walls closing in, the sunlight fading to a dim twilight even at midday. The silence here was different, older, heavier than the open deserts. Twisted junipers clung to impossible ledges. The canyon floor was a jumble of massive boulders and flash flood debris. I used it for cover, moving fast, trying to put distance between myself and the pursuit, listening for any sound that wasn't the rasp of my own breathing or the scrape of my boots on rock. A side canyon appeared, narrower, darker, almost a fissure in the rock. Looked like a dead end. Perfect. I ducked inside, pressing myself into the shadows, rifle ready, listening. Heard them pass the mouth of the fissure. 2, maybe 3 of Lysander's men, moving with disciplined speed down the main canyon, their voices carrying faintly. They hadn't spotted my turnoff. Bought me a little time. This fissure wasn't a dead end. It twisted deeper into the mountain, narrowing further, then opened unexpectedly into a small, hidden box canyon, maybe half an acre, completely invisible from the main gorge. And it wasn't empty. Camouflaged netting stretched between rock overhangs, concealed 3 rugged ATVs and a couple of dirt bikes. Neat stacks of pelican cases, identical to the ones I'd seen at the Ophir Gulch compound, sat beside them. Further back, tucked into a shallow cave at the base of the canyon wall, were more supplies. Fuel cans, water bladders, crates stenciled with what looked like mining industry logos, but the weight distribution felt wrong for simple tools. And a portable generator hummed quietly, wires snaking towards a small operations tent. This was it, Lysander's forward staging area, the cache Caleb the Hermit had hinted at, the place they'd launch their attack on Solguard Alpha and the dam from. Close to the targets, hidden, defensible. They were professionals. I moved closer, silent as a desert shadow. No guards immediately visible. They were likely all out hunting me. The operations tent was zipped shut. I risked a quick look inside. More equipment, detonators, complex wiring harnesses, what looked like seismic resonators, the sympathetic vibration devices Lysander mentioned. And on a folding table, spread out under a battery-powered lantern, was a detailed topographical map of the Solguard Alpha facility and the Hoover Dam spillway area. Red grease pencil marked precise placement points for charges, numbered sequences, detonation timelines. The entire attack plan laid out cold. My heart hammered. This was gold, more than just overheard conversations. This was hard proof. I needed it. Pulled out my burner phone, the one Albright provided supposedly secure, and started snapping photos of the map, the equipment lists, the timelines, praying the old tech was still functional, the signal weak, but hopefully enough for a burst transmission later if I got the chance. Just as I finished photographing the last section of the map, I heard it, the whine of an ATV engine approaching the Box Canyon entrance, one of the search parties returning, or maybe just a routine check. No time to think. I grabbed the map itself, physical proof was better, stuffed it inside my shirt, and backed out of the tent. The ATV, carrying 2 of Lysander's men, rumbled into the canyon, its riders scanning the area. They hadn't seen me yet. I ducked behind one of the parked ATVs, using it for cover. They stopped near the operations tent, one dismounting, heading inside. The other stayed on the ATV, rifle across his lap, looking bored. This was my only chance to get out before the whole canyon was locked down tighter than a drum. I had to take out the guard on the ATV, try to use the vehicle to escape. Calculated risk, very high. I moved, fast and low, circling around behind a stack of fuel cans. The guard was looking the other way, towards the tent. I closed the distance, knife in hand. He must have sensed something, started to turn just as I reached him. Too late. I drove the knife hard into his side, under the ribs, twisting. He gasped, dropping his rifle, slumping forward over the handlebars. I caught him before he fell completely, easing him down silently, taking his rifle, extra clips, jumped onto the ATV, key was in it. turned it. The engine roared to life, louder than I wanted. The operative inside the tent burst out, weapon raised, alerted by the sound. I didn't hesitate, gunned the engine, sending the ATV lurching forward, straight towards him. He fired wildly, rounds kicking up dirt. I swerved, narrowly missing him, then aimed the ATV straight for the narrow entrance of the box canyon, the only way out. He recovered, started firing again from behind me, felt a sharp sting in my shoulder, graze, ignored it. The ATV bounced violently over the rocky terrain, heading back out towards the main canyon system, where I knew more of Lysander A.S. men were still hunting. Burst out of the box canyon mouth just as another ATV, this one carrying 3 more operatives, rounded a bend in the main canyon, heading straight for me. They saw me, saw the commandeered ATV, weapons came up instantly. No way through them. No way back into the box canyon. To my right, the canyon wall was sheer. To my left, a steep, treacherous scree slope leading up towards the rim rock, offering the only possible, insane escape route. I wrenched the handlebars, sending the ATV careening off the main track straight towards the base of the scree slope. Hit it hard, the ATV bucking, tires spinning, trying to find purchase on the loose rock. Gunfire erupted behind me, rounds whizzing past, smacking into the rocks around the ATV. It was a desperate, almost suicidal move, but sitting still meant certain death, and I had Lysander's attack plan clutched inside my shirt. That, at least, had to get out. The dark canyon suddenly felt like it was closing in, intent on claiming another secret. The ATV screamed in protest as I forced it up the impossibly steep scree slope, loose rock and gravel spraying out behind the spinning rear tires. Below me, in the main canyon, Lysander's men were already fanning out from the box canyon staging area, their shouts echoing, rifles cracking as they spotted my desperate ascent. Bullets whined past, smacking into the unforgiving rock face around me, sending stone chips flying like angry hornets. It was a fool's gambit, this climb, but the only alternative was being neatly cornered and executed. The ATV's engine coughed, sputtered on the loose shale near the top, then died with a final pathetic gasp. No matter. It had done its job. I bailed off, scrambling the last 20 feet to the jagged rim rock on foot, just as the first of Lysander's men reached the base of the scree slope, already starting their own pursuit. I didn't wait to offer them encouragement. Plunged over the rim and into the broken, sun-blasted wilderness on the far side of the ridge, the map detailing Lysander's attack plan clutched tight inside my shirt, a burning secret against my skin. Getting back to where I de-stashed the Ford pickup took the rest of the day and a significant chunk of my remaining water and endurance. The Mojave in late afternoon is an unforgiving bitch, heat radiating off the rocks in shimmering waves, shadows offering little respite, every step a gamble against loose footing or a hidden sidewinder. My shoulder, grazed by a rifle round during the ATV escape, throbbed with a dull, insistent ache. By the time I finally reached the pickup, hidden in a shallow wash miles from Ophir Gulch, I was running on fumes, dehydrated, and pissed. Off, with a capital P. The secure satellite phone Albright had provided chirped to life as soon as I cleared the mountains and hit a stretch of lonely highway where the signal bars flickered into existence. I pulled over, killed the engine, the sudden silence of the desert pressing in. "Stone," Albright's voice, cool and crisp as iced gin, came through. "Report. We registered multiple unauthorized vehicle movements and system alerts originating from the Ophir Gulch restricted sector. Mr. Sterling is concerned." "Concerned?" I laughed, a dry, harsh sound. "Lady, your eco-terrorists are professional Ouroboros operatives, led by a guy named Lysander. They're not just hitting your solar panels for kicks. They're planning a coordinated attack on Solguard Alpha and the Hoover Dam spillway controls, using seismic resonators to trigger a grid collapse. Timeline is less than 24 hours. I have their detailed plans. Put Sterling on." A beat of silence. Then, "Mr. Sterling is currently in a secure conference, Mr. Stone. If you could relay your findings through me—" "No," I cut her off. This isn't for the minutes of the next board meeting. This is for the guy signing the checks. Get him, now. Or I call CNN and give them an exclusive on how Sterling Terrigen S. Green Dream is about to become a national security nightmare, courtesy of his own damn incompetence or complicity. Another pause, longer this time. Then a different voice, smoother, deeper, laced with the easy confidence of a man used to owning the room, even a virtual one. Elias Sterling. Mr. Stone. An impressive, if somewhat dramatic, update. You have physical proof of this alleged Ouroboros involvement and wider attack plan? Got Lysander's playbook right here, I said, tapping the map tucked in my shirt. Targeting schematics, detonation sequences, the works. These aren't just disgruntled hippies, Sterling. These are pros, and they re-aiming to take out your entire operation and a good chunk of the Western power grid with it. Sterling was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his tone was strangely calm, almost thoughtful. Lysander, you say? Yes, that name has surfaced in certain ancillary risk assessments. A problematic individual, prone to overreach. He paused. This attack on Solgard Alpha, you're certain of the timing? The methodology? 24 hours? Maybe less, I confirmed. Shaped charges on inverter substations, synchronized with seismic resonators near the dam. It's a sophisticated, multi-stage operation. Indeed, Sterling murmured. And the dam component. You're absolutely certain Lysander intends to proceed with that particular element? There was an odd emphasis in his voice, a probing quality that set my teeth on edge. It's on his maps, Sterling, I snapped, marked as Phase 2. Why? You got a problem with him hitting the dam, but Solgard is fair game? Not at all, Mr. Stone, Sterling said smoothly. All unsanctioned hostile actions against vital infrastructure are, of course, unacceptable. Unsanctioned. The word hung there. But Lysander's faction, they've become increasingly unpredictable. Their methods risk exposing broader, more delicate arrangements. My gut clenched. Broader arrangements? What arrangements are those, Sterling? The kind where a tech mogul looks the other way while a global crime syndicate sets up shop in his backyard, maybe uses his company as a front, as long as they don't mess with his specific quarterly earnings? A dry chuckle from Sterling. You have a cynical mind, Mr. Stone. Refreshing in its own way. He didn't deny it. Let's just say certain pragmatic accommodations are sometimes necessary in a competitive global energy market. Lysander's current agenda, particularly regarding the Hoover Dam, threatens to disrupt a carefully calibrated balance. It draws unwanted attention. The pieces clicked into place, ugly and sharp. Sterling wasn't just a victim. He knew about Ouroboros, knew about Lysander, maybe even had a deal with a different faction of the syndicate. The eco-terrorist story Albright fed me? A carefully crafted lie to get someone like me, deniable, expendable, to take out Lysander S. Rogue Ouroboros cell without implicating Sterling or his more stable syndicate partners. I wasn't hired to stop terrorism. I was hired as a corporate assassin, a pawn in an internal Ouroboros power struggle disguised as green energy protection. So this isn't about saving your solar farm, is it? I said, the words tasting like ash. This is about you needing Lysander taken off the board because he's become inconvenient to your delicate arrangements with Ouroboros. Lysander's actions are reckless and threaten significant investments, Mr. Stone. Yours, mine, and those of other stakeholders who prefer stability, Sterling replied, his voice now edged with steel. Your primary objective remains the neutralization of Lysander's immediate threat to Solgard Alpha. That aligns with our interests perfectly. The dam, that situation is more complex. Other assets are being deployed to monitor and contain that aspect. Your focus should be Solgard. Other assets, meaning Sterling or his Ouroboros partners had their own people ready to step in if Lysander actually tried to hit the dam, or maybe just to ensure the fallout was managed according to their script. I was just the hired muscle for the preliminary cleanup. "You played me, Sterling," I said, my voice flat. "I provided you with an opportunity, Mr. Stone," he corrected. "A very lucrative one. To do what you do best. Neutralize a threat. The fact that this threat also happens to be a business competitor or an internal syndicate problem is merely a convergence of interests." He paused. "You have the plans. You know the timeline. Stop Lysander's attack on Solguard Alpha. Do that, and your final payment will be doubled. Fail, or broaden your focus unnecessarily, and you will find the Mojave a very lonely place to disappear. Ms. Albright will provide any further logistical support you require." The line went dead. I sat there in the cab of the pickup, the desert stretching empty and hostile all around me, the secure sat phone feeling like a venomous snake in my hand. Sterling wasn't just a victim. He was a player deeply enmeshed with the syndicate, using me as a deniable weapon in their internal wars, sacrificing his own facility as acceptable collateral damage if it meant getting rid of a rogue like Lysander and protecting his larger Ouroboros partnership. The true threat wasn't just Lysander anymore. It was my own damn client. And the 24-hour clock on Lysander's attack was still ticking. I was caught in the middle of a tech mogul's deadly game, with the fate of a major power grid hanging in the balance. And I didn't trust anyone. Not Sterling, not Albright, maybe not even the ground beneath my feet anymore. The mirage had lifted, revealing an even uglier reality. The silence after Elias Sterling hung up, the secure sat phone, was heavier than the Mojave heat pressing in through the Ford AS dusty windshield. Played. Again. Hired as a deniable asset, a disposable scalpel to excise a rogue Ouroboros tumor, Lysander, that was threatening Sterling's own, more stable syndicate partnerships. My job wasn't to stop eco-terrorists. It was to do Sterling's dirty work, take out a competitor, and probably get myself killed in the process, neatly tying up all loose ends. The promised double pay now felt like blood money offered for my own funeral. Anger, cold and familiar, settled in my gut. Sterling, Albright, Lysander, Ouroboros. They were all just different heads of the same damn serpent, coiling around the globe, squeezing the life out of everything for profit and power. But Lysander's plan to hit Solguard Alpha and the Hoover Dam spillway was still ticking. Less than 24 hours. Whether Sterling wanted it to happen or just wanted Lysander out of the way, didn't he change the fact that a catastrophic grid collapse was imminent? I still had to stop it. Not for Sterling, not for the bigger picture Thorne used to preach, but because letting that kind of chaos unfold, letting that many innocent lives get caught in the fallout, that wasn't something I could walk away from. Not anymore. I studied the map I'd lifted from Lysander's staging area in Ophir Gulch. Red grease pencil marked the target locations at Solguard Alpha, primary inverter substations, fiber optic control hubs, and the placements for the seismic resonators near the dam. Sophisticated, precise, devastating if successful. My only chance was to get to Solguard before Lysander's teams finished planting their charges, disrupt them, maybe use their own explosives against them. A direct assault was suicide. I needed to be smarter, faster. I started the Ford's engine, pointed it towards the Sterling Terrigen facility, pushing the truck hard over the washboard access roads. The Mojave blurred past, a desolate panorama of sun-baked earth, creosote bushes, and distant shimmering mountains. I kept an eye on the rearview mirror, half expecting Sterling to send his own assets to ensure I focused solely on Lysander. And didn't he get any bright ideas about exposing Sterling Terrigen Ouroboros partnerships? Or maybe Lysander's people, alerted after the Ophir Gulch shootout, were already hunting me. The desert felt vast, empty, but 1,000 unseen eyes could be watching. I was maybe 10 miles from the Solgard perimeter, navigating a narrow cut through a low basalt ridge when the world erupted. Not with a bang, but with a sudden, violent thump that slammed up through the truck's chassis, followed by the screaming shriek of tortured metal. The Ford lurched sickeningly to the right, steering wheel ripped from my hands. Hit a mine? No, too precise. This felt different. The truck slewed sideways, tires blowing out, crashing into the rocky side of the cut with a bone-jarring impact. My head slammed against the side window. Stars exploded. For a moment, just ringing silence and the smell of hot oil and dust. Then, gunfire. Heavy-caliber rounds punching through the truck's bodywork. Not indiscriminate fire. These were aimed shots, tearing through the engine block, shredding the remaining tires. They weren't trying to kill me outright, not yet. They were disabling my vehicle, pinning me inside. Ambush. Professional. Well-sighted. They'd been waiting. How? Did Sterling tip them off after our call? Or had Lysander's scouts tracked me from Ophir Gulch, predicted my route to Solgard? Didn't matter. I was caught. Adrenaline surged, clearing the fog from my head. Grabbed the bullpup rifle I'd taken from the scout in Ophir Gulch. Kicked open the passenger door, the driver's side was pinned against the rock wall, and rolled out into the scant cover of a shallow ditch beside the road just as another burst of fire ripped through the cab where I'd been sitting. 2 shooters, maybe 3, positioned high up on the ridge overlooking the cut, silhouetted against the harsh sun, making clean shots difficult for me. Perfect for them. They had the high ground, the angles, the initiative. Standard infantry ambush. Lysander's people, no doubt. They weren't playing eco-terrorist anymore. I returned fire, short, controlled bursts towards their muzzle flashes, trying to make them keep their heads down, buying myself seconds. The bullpup felt good in my hands, spitting rounds with authority, but I was outgunned, out-F-positioned. The Mojave tried its best to kill me over the next few hours. After scrambling away from the wrecked Ford pickup and Lysander's welcoming committee, I pushed deeper into the jumble of canyons and arroyos, my left shoulder a screaming knot of torn muscle and ground-in grit my canteen lost with the truck. The sun climbed, a malevolent white eye in a bleached sky, sucking the moisture out of me, baking the rocks until they shimmered with heat. Each step was an agony, each shadow a fleeting, insufficient tease of relief. Behind me, I occasionally heard the distant whine of ATVs or the faint thrum of a helicopter. Lysander's men, sweeping the desert, patient, professional. They knew I was wounded, knew I was on foot. They had time. I didn't. Survival mode. Thorne's old lessons kicked in, hard and brutal. Find water, find cover, stay unpredictable. I followed dry washes, knowing they sometimes led to hidden seeps. Found one, finally, a patch of damp sand under an overhang, yielding a few precious muddy mouthfuls. Not enough, but better than nothing. Kept moving, using the terrain, backtracking, laying false trails, anything to confuse pursuit. The Sig Sauer felt heavy, comforting, but with only 2 spare clips I'd salvaged from the agency takedown in Panama, every round was precious. The bullpup rifle from the Ophir Gulch scout was long gone, lost during the initial ambush. By late afternoon, staggering with exhaustion and thirst, I stumbled into a narrow box canyon, almost by accident, and saw it. Not a mirage this time. Tucked under a deep rock overhang, camouflaged with netting and desert scrub, were 2 canvas-covered supply caches and a single, newer-looking ATV, probably a scout vehicle. No guards immediately visible. Either they were very well hidden, or this was a secondary drop point, temporarily unmanned. My heart hammered against my ribs. An opportunity. A reckless, stupid, probably fatal opportunity, but an opportunity nonetheless. If this was part of Lysander's staging for the Solgard Hoover Dam attack, and given the proximity to Ophir Gulch and the general direction of Solgard, it had to be, then disrupting it here could throw a serious wrench in his 24-hour timeline. Maybe buy me more time. Maybe buy Sterling more time to get whatever other assets he mentioned into play. Not that I gave a damn about Sterling's agenda anymore. This was about stopping the attack, period. I spent 20 precious minutes observing from a rocky outcrop above the canyon floor. No movement, just the quiet hum of insects and the sigh of the wind through the sparse desert vegetation. The ATV looked fueled, ready. The caches. Those were the prize. Moving with the last reserves of strength, I circled around, approaching the caches from the blind side of the rock overhang. Reached them, pulled back the corner of one canvas tarp. Pelican cases. Identical to the ones I'd seen at Ophir Gulch. Electronics. Detonators. Maybe the seismic resonators themselves. The other cache held fuel cans, water bladders, ration packs. Jackpot. No time to steal much, no way to carry it. But destruction was quick. I grabbed one of the 5-gallon fuel cans, unscrewed the cap, started splashing gasoline liberally over the Pelican cases, the other fuel cans, the operations tent Caleb mentioned, if this was a more advanced version of what he'd seen, soaking the dry canvas tarps. The fumes were acrid, dizzying in the heat. Then, a flicker of movement at the canyon mouth. A scout on foot, rifle held ready, working his way slowly, methodically, checking for tracks. He hadn't seen me yet, but he would. I pulled out the cheap Zippo I always carried. My hands were shaking, not just from exhaustion. This was it. No turning back. Struck the flint. Flame flared. Took one last look at the fuel-soaked cache, then tossed the Zippo onto the nearest tarp. It caught instantly with a greedy whoomph. Flames leaping high, black smoke beginning to billow. The scout at the canyon mouth yelled, raising his rifle, firing towards the sudden blaze. I didn't wait for an invitation. Scrambled onto the nearby ATV, found the keys in the ignition, sloppy, Lysander, very sloppy, and hit the starter. The engine roared to life. I gunned it, sending the ATV bucking and fishtailing out from under the rock overhang, heading straight for the canyon mouth, straight towards the now alerted scout. He fired again, wild this time, surprised by my sudden appearance on his own vehicle. I didn't fire back. Just aimed the ATV directly at him, forcing him to leap aside at the last second to avoid being run down. I roared past him, out of the box canyon, back into the slightly wider main wash, heading away from Ophir Gulch, away from Soul Guard for the moment, needing to create distance, confusion. Behind me, the fire at the cache site must have reached the other fuel cans, or maybe some of the detonators. A series of sharp secondary explosions ripped through the desert silence, followed by a much larger concussion that shook the ground even under the ATV's tires. A plume of oily black smoke climbed high into the sky, visible for miles. Fire in the sands. Lysander's carefully laid plans, his meticulously cached supplies for the attack, were going up in smoke. It wouldn't stop him completely. Ouroboros had resources, but it would hurt. It would delay him. It would force him to reevaluate, maybe resupply, and it would make him even more furious, more determined to find the man causing him so much trouble. I risked a glance back, saw figures. More of Lysander's men appearing at the mouth of the box canyon, staring at the inferno, then turning, spotting me on the fleeing ATV. Rifles came up, shots rang out, but I was already gaining distance, bouncing over rocks, pushing the ATV to its limit. I'd kicked the hornet's nest again, this time setting it on fire. Bought myself some breathing room, maybe. Thrown a wrench in Lysander's timeline. But I was still alone, still wounded, still hunted, with very little left except a burning resolve to see this through, to stop the attack on Soul Guard and the dam, regardless of Sterling's games or Ouroboros' reach. The Mojave stretched before me, vast and unforgiving. And somewhere out there, Lysander was regrouping, his rattler eyes undoubtedly fixed on my trail. The real showdown was yet to come. The fire I'd started back in that box canyon painted a lurid, wavering glow against the bruised purple of the pre-dawn sky, a beacon of defiance that probably had every Ouroboros operative within 50 miles scrambling like kicked ants. Good. Let them scramble. It bought me time. Not much, but maybe just enough. I ditched the smoking ATV miles ago, pushing it into a deep arroyo, and was now on foot. The commandeered bullpup rifle feeling heavy but reassuring. The map from Lysander's staging area tucked securely inside my shirt. My shoulder throbbed where the scout's bullet had grazed me, a dull counterpoint to the sharper ache in my leg from the earlier ambush. Dehydration was a constant companion, the desert air sucking moisture from me with greedy indifference. Lysander's timeline was tight. 24 hours to hit SolGuard Alpha S inverter substations and simultaneously trigger his sympathetic vibrations near the Hoover Dam spillway. The cache fire would delay him, force him to improvise, maybe scale back. But a man like Lysander, a true believer in his own twisted Ouroboros vision of creative destruction for profit, wouldn't just pack up and go home. He'd adapt. He'd strike with whatever he had left. And SolGuard Alpha, Sterling's glittering sea of solar panels, was the closest, easiest target. I pushed myself hard through the last hours of darkness, navigating by the stars and the jagged silhouette of the mountains that cradled Sterling's facility. Reached the perimeter fence of SolGuard Alpha just as the first hint of gray light touched the eastern horizon. Miles and miles of chain link, topped with razor wire, cameras every 100 yards, occasional Sterling Terrigen security patrols in white pickups. Looked impressive, but fences were made to be breached, especially when you knew where the attackers were likely to hit. Lysander's map had been chillingly precise. 3 primary inverter substations, critical nodes for converting and transmitting the solar farm's massive power output. Take those out, and SolGuard went dark, sending shock waves through the already volatile energy market. I bypassed the main gates, circled wide, using the undulating desert terrain and the deep shadows still clinging to the western edge of the array for cover. Found a spot where a dry wash passed under the fence line. A concrete culvert, probably prone to flash floods, not ideal for permanent sensor placement. Slipped through, emerging inside the vast, silent expanse of solar panels, stretching for acres like a dark metallic sea under the awakening sky. The air hummed faintly with contained power. Moving between the long rows of tilted panels felt like navigating a futuristic maze. I headed towards the nearest substation marked on Lysander's map, rifle ready, every sense on high alert. The attack would come soon, with the dawn, when shift changes and the rising sun might offer momentary distractions. Spotted them near substation Bravo 7. 3 figures dressed in dark desert camo fatigues, moving with professional efficiency around the main transformer bank. They weren't just planting simple charges, they were attaching what looked like sophisticated electronic devices to the control conduits, maybe EMP pulse emitters or high-frequency jammers designed to fry the substation's delicate guts from the inside out, consistent with the tech Caleb the Hermit hinted at. 2 worked on the devices while the third stood watch, rifle held ready. Lysander's reduced team, working fast, making do after the cache fire. No time for subtlety, no chance to take them all down silently. I needed to stop them before they armed those devices. I raised the bullpup rifle, took a deep breath, aimed for the nearest operative working on the transformer, and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed flatly in the vast emptiness of the solar farm. The operative grunted, spinning, clutching his leg as he went down. His partner looked up, startled, then dove for cover behind a transformer. The lookout whirled, firing a burst from his own assault rifle in my general direction, rounds screaming off the solar panel frames above my head, shattering glass. I dropped low, scrambling behind a concrete support pillar, returning fire. This wasn't going to be easy. They were professionals, reacting instantly, laying down disciplined covering fire. But I had surprise, and the knowledge of their target. One of them, The one who I'd taken cover behind the transformer, broke from his position trying to flank me, moving fast through the rows of panels. I tracked him, fired a short burst, saw him stumble, go down hard, not moving. One left with the first guy I hit, who was now trying to drag himself towards his weapon. The lookout was good, though. He kept me pinned, his shots accurate, forcing me to stay behind the pillar. I needed to move, close the distance, or he'd eventually get a lucky shot. The sun was higher now, glinting off the endless panels, making it hard to see clearly. Then, the first operative, the one I'd hit in the leg, managed to reach something. A small, dark box with an antenna. A detonator? Or the arming switch for their devices? He fumbled with it, his face contorted in pain and desperate resolve. No choice. I broke cover, sprinting towards him, firing the bullpup as I ran, ignoring the lookout's shots whizzing past. The wounded operative looked up, saw me coming, his eyes wide with panic. He stabbed a button on the device just as my rounds hit him, throwing him backwards. A high-pitched whine suddenly filled the air, emanating from the devices attached to the transformers. A rising, sickening thrum that vibrated through the ground, through my teeth. Emergency lights on the substation control panel began flashing red. Were they armed? About to blow? The remaining lookout, seeing his comrades down and the devices apparently activated, made his decision. He wasn't sticking around for the fireworks. He turned and sprinted away, disappearing back into the maze of solar panels, abandoning the mission. I ignored him. Focused on the whining devices, the flashing red lights, had to disable them. Now, ran towards the main transformer bank. The devices were small, metallic, clamped onto the primary conduits, wires snaking into control panels. No obvious off switch. Maybe shooting them would work? Risky. Could trigger a catastrophic short, an explosion. Saw a heavy-duty emergency cutoff lever on the main power input panel for the substation. Big, red, clearly marked. If I could kill the power to the whole substation, maybe it would de-energize whatever hell Lysander's crew had planted. Reached the panel, grabbed the lever. It was stiff, heavy. Put my whole weight into it, shoulders screaming in protest. With a groan of tortured metal and a shower of sparks from a nearby capacitor bank, the lever slammed downwards. The high-pitched whine from the devices cut out instantly. The red emergency lights on the substation flickered, then died. Silence descended, broken only by the distant desert wind and the sound of my own ragged breathing. I stood there for a moment, leaning against the silent transformer, rifle dangling from my hand. Soul Guard Alpha was safe, at least this section of it. Lysander's attack here was foiled, but the map in my shirt showed 2 more substations targeted within Soul Guard, plus the far more dangerous Phase 2 involving the Hoover Dam and those seismic resonators. And Lysander himself was still out there, along with whatever forces he had left. A new sound reached me. The distant but distinct thump-thump-thump of helicopter rotors approaching fast from the east, from the direction of Las Vegas. Sterling's other assets arriving to monitor the dam situation? Or maybe just Sterling's private cavalry coming to survey the damage and deal with the loose end named Ethan Stone. My work here was done for the moment. Time to disappear again before the next wave of trouble arrived. The solar inferno had been averted, but the desert day was far from over. The high-pitched whine of the sabotage devices at Substation Bravo 7 died with a pathetic fizzle as I slammed the main power cutoff lever down. Silence, vast and sudden, descended over the sea of solar panels, broken only by the distant desert wind and the growing thump-thump-thump of approaching helicopters. Not Sterling's cavalry coming to congratulate Ethan Stone on a job well done. The flight path, the speed, the aggressive sound of the rotors. These weren't rescue birds. These were hornets returning to a kicked nest. Lysander's hornets. And they weren't heading for Soul Guard. They were veering east, towards the mountains that cradled the Hoover Dam. Towards Phase 2 of their attack. Lysander's map, still tucked inside my bloody shirt, showed the location, a so-called geothermal monitoring outpost nestled in a blind canyon about 10 miles from the dam's main spillway. The spot where he planned to deploy his seismic resonators, the place he'd likely use as his final command post to trigger the synchronized grid collapse. He was still in play. And if those helicopters reached him, delivered reinforcements, or extracted him before I could get there, no time to wait for Albright SE logistical support, which would likely arrive with a kill order for me attached. I scanned the Solgard substation. Sterling's security here was probably still reeling from my little firefight, but there'd be vehicles. Found a Sterling Terrigen maintenance truck, keys in the ignition. Henderson's people were getting sloppy, or maybe just shell-shocked. It wasn't fast, but it was tough, and it had a full tank of gas. I pointed it east, towards the distant, hazy line of mountains, pushing the truck harder than it liked over the rough desert tracks, chasing the diminishing sound of Lysander's helicopters. The map from Ophir Gulch was my guide now, leading me into increasingly broken, treacherous terrain. Canyons narrowed, rock walls rose sheer on either side. This was Ouroboros country, chosen for its isolation, its defensibility. After an hour of bone-jarring travel, I found it. Not a clearly marked outpost, but a narrow, almost invisible side canyon, its entrance cleverly camouflaged with natural rock falls and desert scrub. The tracks leading into it were fresh, distinctive, the same specialized ATVs Lysander's crew used. This was the place, the hidden energy bunker the outline had so clinically described. I ditched the truck half a mile back, approached on foot, bullpup rifle from the Ophir Gulch scout held ready. The canyon opened into a wider bowl, and there it was. Looked like an old abandoned mining operation from the outside, a few derelict buildings, a rusting head frame. But closer, I saw the telltale signs: new steel doors, reinforced concrete, discreetly placed surveillance cameras, and a faint hum of generators emanating from deep within the rock face. Thorne, Vance, Alistair Thorne in Panama. Ouroboros loved their hidden fortresses. Lysander was no different. No obvious guards outside. They were either all inside, confident in their isolation, or deployed further out setting up the seismic gear. Stealth was my only option. I found a ventilation shaft, old, probably part of the original mine workings, but recently re-sleeved with modern ducting. The grill was rusted but gave way with a grunt of effort. Slipped inside. The shaft was tight, dark, smelled of stale air and machine oil, led downwards, emerged into a dimly lit utility corridor, concrete walls, humming conduits, empty. I moved slowly, carefully, following signs that pointed towards seismic operations control. The bunker was surprisingly extensive, carved deep into the mountain. Reached a heavy steel door, keypad lock, no time for finesse. I'd seen enough of Lysander-S gear at the staging area to know what he used. The charges I'd liberated from one of the Pelican cases there, small-shaped, designed for precise demolition, were perfect. Planted one against the lock mechanism, set a 10-second timer, retreated around a corner. The muffled thump was satisfyingly effective. The steel door buckled inwards. Charge through the opening, rifle up, ready for anything. The control room was a hive of activity. Not a large space, but packed with electronics. Banks of monitors displayed seismic readings, power grid schematics, satellite uplinks. 3 technicians hunched over consoles, oblivious, and standing before a central command interface, his back to me, was Lysander. He turned as I entered, no surprise on his face, just a cold, assessing look. Those rattler eyes Caleb the Hermit described. He held a small, ruggedized datapad in one hand. "Ah, Mr. Stone," he said, his voice calm, that faint European accent more pronounced now. "Or Kincaid, should I say. Your persistence is more remarkable, if ultimately futile. You're too late. The resonators are deployed. The sequence is armed." He tapped the datapad. "Just awaiting my final authorization." "Not gonna happen, Lysander," I said, my rifle centered on his chest. The three technicians had frozen, hands slowly rising. Won't it? Lysander smiled, a thin, chilling expression. You can't stop it. Even if you kill me, the sequence will auto-initiate in... He glanced at a timer on the main console. Precisely 7 minutes. Enough time for my associates to ensure my extraction and for you to contemplate your failure. He gestured slightly with the datapad. This facility is also rigged for, shall we say, rapid environmental remediation. A final mirage, leaving nothing behind but dust and echoes. Self-destruct, of course, of 7 minutes. Not enough time to disarm his seismic network across miles of desert. Not enough time to fight my way out if his extraction team was already en route, but maybe enough time to ensure he didn't enjoy the show. Then we all go together, I said grimly. Before I could fire, before Lysander could hit whatever panic button he had, one of the technicians, the youngest one, suddenly lunged, not at me, but at Lysander, screaming something in Russian, tackling him from behind. Lysander stumbled, surprised, the datapad flying from his hand, skittering across the floor. The other two technicians hesitated, then seemed to make a choice. They weren't Ouroboros fanatics. They were hired guns, tech support. They dove for cover behind their consoles as Lysander roared in rage, wrestling with the young technician who was now trying to claw at his eyes. That was my opening. I fired a short burst from the bullpup, not at Lysander yet, but at the main control console he'd been standing before, shattering screens, ripping through delicate circuitry. Sparks flew, alarms shrieked, different alarms this time, system failure warnings. The timer on the console flickered, then died. The auto-initiation sequence hopefully was crippled. Lysander, freeing himself from the surprisingly tenacious young technician, saw his console destroyed. His face contorted with fury. He drew a heavy-caliber pistol from beneath his jacket, turned towards me. "You meddling fool! You have no idea what you've just interfered with." The bunker suddenly shuddered violently. Not from my shots, from something deeper, more powerful. A low, grinding roar echoed through the rock. Dust sifted from the ceiling. One of the monitors still flickering showed massive, chaotic energy spikes from the seismic resonator network. Uncontrolled, unsequenced activation. My shots, or the technician's desperate lunge disrupting Lysander, must have triggered a catastrophic overload in the system. The resonators weren't just armed, they were going off all at once, right beneath us. "He's activated them!" the young technician screamed, scrambling back. "The whole mountain is coming down!" Lysander looked around wildly, understanding dawning in his eyes. His carefully orchestrated symphony of destruction was turning into a suicidal cacophony. He looked at me, pure hatred burning in his gaze. "You!" He raised his pistol. I fired the bullpup at the same instant. My rounds hit him center mass, throwing him back against the wall. His shot went wide, smashing into a conduit overhead, bringing down a shower of sparks and debris. He slid down the wall, leaving a bloody smear, his eyes still fixed on me with that burning hatred, then glazed over. The bunker groaned again, a sickening lurch. Concrete cracked. Lights failed completely, replaced by the dim red glow of emergency beacons. The mountain was tearing itself apart. No time for philosophy, no time for regrets, just survival. I grabbed the arm of the young Russian technician, the one who'd inadvertently saved my life and maybe half of Nevada, and yelled, "This way! The ventilation shaft I came in, it might still hold!" We scrambled out of the collapsing control room, leaving Lysander's body amidst the sparking, dying machinery. The access corridor was already buckling, rocks falling. We reached the utility shaft just as the main passage behind us caved in with a deafening roar, pulled ourselves up into the narrow shaft, clawing our way towards the distant pinprick of starlight high above, as the final mirage of Lysander's hidden energy bunker and Ouroboros' Mojave gambit began its violent, self-inflicted descent into oblivion. We clawed our way out of that ventilation shaft into the cool pre-dawn desert air like two moles escaping a collapsing burrow. Behind us, the ground still shuddered intermittently, deep rumbles echoing up from the mountain-'s guts as Lysander's hidden energy bunker tore itself apart. Ophir Gulch, the ghost town that harbored Ouroboros' latest nightmare, was now giving up its own violent ghosts. Dust hung thick in the air, tasting of pulverized rock and something acrid, chemical. The young Russian technician Dima was shaking like a leaf, his face pale and streaked with grime, eyes wide with the terror of a man who'd just seen his immediate future implode. His English was fractured, but his gratitude, when he finally found his voice, was genuine enough. You saved me," he stammered, looking back towards the collapsing canyon. Lysander, he would have killed us all." "He damn near did," I grunted, my shoulder screaming, leg protesting every movement. "He also probably saved us a lot of paperwork explaining those seismic resonators to the Park Service." I handed Dima the last of my water from a canteen ID, grabbed off one of Lysander's men. "Listen, Dima, this place is going to be swarming with people soon. People who ask a lot of questions you don't want to answer. You need to disappear." "Disappear? Where?" He looked lost, adrift. "South," I said, pointing towards the hazy line of mountains that marked the Mexican border, still a day's hard trek away. "Or north, towards Vegas. Try to lose yourself in the city. Change your name. Forget everything you saw here. Forget Lysander. Forget Ouroboros. Forget me." I pressed a wad of cash into his hand, what was left of Sterling A.S. initial payment, minus my own considerable expenses. "This might help. Good luck." He stared at the money, then at me, conflicted. "But who are you?" "Just a guy who was in the wrong place at the wrong time," I said. "Story of my life." I didn't wait for more questions, just gave him a curt nod and melted back into the desert shadows, heading towards where I'd been forced to ditch my battered Ford pickup. He had his chance. Whether he took it, whether Ouroboros or his own former employers ever caught up with him, not my problem anymore. I had my own ghosts to deal with. The journey back to Florida was a long, painful blur. Ditched the Ford near Barstow, hopped a freight train east, then switched to anonymous long-haul buses, always watching my back, always feeling the phantom weight of surveillance. My shoulder wound was nasty, infected, needing antibiotics I didn't have until I could risk a discreet visit to a back-alley doctor in New Orleans who specialized in patching up people who didn't like hospitals or police reports. By the time I finally eased the Sea Witch out of her hidden Apalachicola Creek anchorage and pointed her south toward slightly warmer, slightly less haunted waters, weeks had passed. Sully's final report on the Mojave incident, delivered via our usual untraceable comms once I signaled I was back in relative safety, was predictably opaque. Official story on Ophir Gulch is unexplained seismic event leading to localized geological collapse, he relayed, his voice devoid of inflection. Sterling Terrigen reported minor temporary disruptions at Solgard Alpha due to grid fluctuations, now fully operational. Elias Sterling is publicly championing new federal funding for critical infrastructure resilience against natural geological threats. Convenient. Lysander and his team are presumed lost in the Ophir Gulch event. No bodies recovered, no Ouroboros chatter admitting losses. Just silence. "And Albright?" I asked, thinking of Sterling's cool, efficient VP. "Still by Sterling's side," Sully said. "Looks like their little internal power play worked out. Lysander's rogue operation neutralized. Sterling's Ouroboros faction maintains control of whatever game they replaying with renewable energy in the West. You were the perfect deniable instrument, Jack. Yeah, perfect. The word left a taste like desert dust in my mouth. Back in the familiar solitude of the Sea Witch's cockpit, anchored now off a deserted stretch of the Marquesas Keys, I watched the sun bleed into the Gulf, turning the water to molten gold. The physical scars from the Mojave would fade eventually, just like the others. But the desert had left a different kind of mark this time, deeper, etched into my understanding of the enemy. Ouroboros wasn't just sophisticated, they were insidious, deeply embedded. Sterling wasn't just a client, he was a player, a high-level corporate proxy using his legitimate business as a shield and a weapon, willing to sacrifice his own assets, manipulate events, even collude with one faction of the syndicate to eliminate another, all while preaching green energy and corporate responsibility. The lines weren't just blurred anymore, they were non-existent. Profit, idealism, terror, geopolitics, it was all just grist for their mill, interchangeable components in their vast globe-spanning machine. Caleb, the old hermit in Ophir Gulch, had it right. They weren't just watching lizards, they were watching the sky, listening to the earth, planning on a scale that beggared belief. The environmental group cover, the eco-terrorist misdirection. It was just another layer of the mirage, designed to mask their true intentions. And their true intentions, I was beginning to realize, might be far more terrifying than just profit or power. Rostova's warnings about genetic manipulation, the biotech hints from the Ouroboros data Thorne briefly held, the sheer audacity of the Argus Eye EMP plot, it all pointed towards a long game, an end game, that was truly apocalyptic. I thought about the young technician, Dima, who'd inadvertently helped trigger the bunker's collapse. Another life thrown into chaos because of Ouroboros's grand designs. Like Anna, like Sparrow, like countless others whose names I'd never know. The Syndicate's larger network didn't just operate in the shadows. It fed on the legitimate world, twisting it, corrupting it from within, turning idealism into fanaticism, enterprise into exploitation. The sun finally vanished, leaving behind a sky bruised with twilight and the first pinpricks of stars. A profound weariness settled over me, heavier than the humid Keys air. I'd stopped Lysander, prevented a catastrophe in the Mojave, another tactical victory in a war that felt increasingly unwinnable. But Ouroboros was still out there, stronger, more adaptable, their influence growing like a cancer. Sterling was still out there, a respectable face on a monstrous enterprise. Thorne was still out there, playing his own godlike games. The desert had left its scar on the land, a raw wound where Lysander's bunker had imploded. And it had left its scar on me, a deeper understanding of the enemy's chameleon nature, their ability to wear any mask, co-opt any cause, sacrifice anyone to achieve their aims. My place in this world of blurred lines felt more uncertain than ever. Was I a tool for justice? Or just another cleaner mopping up the messes left by bigger, more powerful monsters? Inadvertently serving their long-term goals by eliminating their inconvenient rivals? The gentle rocking of the Sea Witch was usually a comfort. Tonight it just felt like being adrift in a vast, dark ocean, with unseen leviathans circling in the depths. The Mojave mirage had dissolved, but the shadows it cast were longer, colder, and pointed towards an even more uncertain horizon. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning to reveal its true, terrifying scale.